For everyone who's joining to our discussion, welcome. And we're really excited to have this important conversation today on not just this human rights situation in Azerbaijan, but also focusing on a particularly important case study with a political prisoner. And we're really happy that we can speak to you, Ibad, about this beautiful situation. Before diving into that, I'd just like to give just a short introduction to who's behind our discussion today. So my name is Zoe, and together with Francesca, my colleague, we'll be just having this informal talk on discussing this issue. And we are part of a youth-led organization that discusses basically political and human rights related discussions and topics with everything from activists such as today, experts and politicians, diplomats, like all actors that are basically relevant to discuss anything from human rights, the rule of law, democracy, and many other issues. And yeah, our goal is just to engage more people in these important issues and to hopefully inspire each other for actual solutions to these problems. So without further ado, Fanny, take it away.
Yeah, so good evening also from my side, and thanks for Ibad for joining us today and everyone listening in. Today we have a quite important topic, quite urgent one as well, because we have seen in the last weeks that, and actually the last months, that the human rights situation in Azerbaijan has increasingly worsened. And today we have a very specific case that we want to talk about, and that's the political prisoner Gubad Ibadoghlu, who is well known at the moment, who has been talked about in the media, and there have been resolutions passed by the European Parliament demanding his immediate release. And the situation is urgent because his health situation is really bad. And today we're very happy to welcome Ibad Bayramov, who is his son and has been advocating fiercely for his release. Even going to the Council of Europe, many institutions. So we're very glad that you have time to join us today. And we would just maybe start with the very basic question, what is the situation of your father like? Because he has been arrested in July 2023, so almost 5 months ago. Can you maybe give us a brief introduction of what happened since?
Hi, thank you for inviting me, and I'm very excited to actually raise this case here because I think it's very much related to the European affairs too. My father has been in prison since 23rd of July 2023. It's almost 5 months now. He was imprisoned together with my mother, but my mother was released 3 hours later that day. But my father is still in prison. Fun fact, my father was actually going back to see my grandmother with my mother when 2 cars, one from the right, one from the left, actually hit his car and stopped him that way, then dragged him, my mother to another car and my father to another car. Actually, that's how they detained him. But then we asked, my uncle asked the head of the police station that why didn't they just invite him? He would have come himself anyway, and they said we didn't know where he was, which is quite interesting. The fact that they actually crossed that road, my mom was recalling that there was no car in the highway, so they basically crossed the highway just to do this operation. And then later on, very recently, in a response to the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights has asked about my father's detainment. They have mentioned that my father was called to the police station, and then my mother didn't want to leave him alone, so she came together with him. That's how he got detained. So it's quite interesting that they are blatantly lying at this point about simple things as his detainment and how he got detained. He was detained on the 23rd of July with the allegation of counterfeit money, selling and exchanging counterfeit foreign exchange money, which was equal to 40,000 United States dollars that was found in the office of his which he has not used in the past 9 years. And also the interesting point up there is that his office earlier that day, because my uncle is actually HR and tax bookseller, so he would usually keep his books in that office. That's the only reason why we would use that office. And he tried to get into the office building to get a book and deliver it to the customer, but he couldn't open the door. So we do suspect that that money was planted a night earlier. And then when they came and opened the gate of the door, when they opened the door, they basically found the money that they planted a night earlier. And also another fun fact, my father was charged with the $40,000 counterfeit money. Recently, Absas Media director Ulvi Hassani was also detained, and turns out he had 40,000 euros in his office. So the currencies change, but the amount of money does not change. So we have received another accusation after the selling of counterfeit money. The second allegation is the distribution of extremist religious books, which came 2 months later. Issue with that one was that during the investigation in the office, there was nothing about this written on the protocol. So if something is not on the protocol, it's actually illegal that then later on the prosecutor is able to find it. But turns out after 2 months later, they found this around 50 religious books within the documents in the office, and they labeled that my father was planning to distribute them in order to raise awareness with his extremist religious plans. And in one of the court cases, it was said that he had a plan to do coup d'etat in Azerbaijan in October 2023, but he was actually going to leave Azerbaijan in end of August 2023 because he was going to start working his fellowship at the TU Dresden University in Germany, in the city of Dresden. So he wasn't even going to stay until October. In order to
maybe as a short background for those who are not as familiar. So he was an academic and also political oppositioner, right? So maybe you could, yeah.
Yeah, he was actually an academic who worked in, as I mentioned, he didn't live in the country for the past 9 years because he was working in the US and the UK as a professor at the universities. In the US, he worked at UNC Chapel Hill, Duke University, Princeton University, and Rutgers University. Then in 2021, he moved to London and started working at London School of Economics and Political Science. He was also a corruption expert. He was an investigator. He has worked during his time in London. He used the Pandora Papers, and he has raised the case of Azerbaijan government buying properties in the London, UK through their offshore accounts. To be more directly, the family of Azerbaijan president buying, and he actually bought 466,604,000 million pounds of properties only in London, UK, the president of Azerbaijan and his family. And one of the properties was actually sold to the crown state of the UK government. So that's quite an interesting one. He was also a leader of the political movement, Azerbaijan Prosperity and Democracy Movement. It could not be converted into a party because his request to convert it into a party was rejected 5 times, despite the fact that he had all his papers in place. We believe this was done under the political motivated decision, not letting him turning his movement into a party. So there are many reasons why we believe he could be imprisoned. One of them is obviously his corruption expertise. He, especially in the past 2 years while being in London, he was working very extensively on the Azerbaijan government corruption cases. He worked on the budget transparency. He worked on the Azerbaijan government's deal with the EU Commission. He worked on the reconstruction projects, transparency in the Nagorno-Karabakh region, because there's a lot of reconstruction process going at the moment. That's basically given to the Azerbaijan and Turkish government affiliates. Apart from that, another thing he has done, he actually established a charity fund in UK, in England, and also in Wales, which was called Azerbaijan Youth Educational Foundation. And he wanted to finance this charity fund through the confiscated money by the UK National Crime Agency that they confiscated from the Azerbaijan oligarchs and Azerbaijan laundromats in the UK, and also through donations. Recently, there has been 3 special cases in the UK that was known that's in the UK National Crime Agency courts. So there's a case of Javanshi Feyziyev, which is 5.6 million pounds confiscated by him. He's known as Azerbaijan laundromat in the UK media. There's a case of Izzat Khanım Javadova. She was 6.4 million pounds. And right now, there's a case of Zamira Hajieva, which is 30 million pounds. It is still ongoing. These cases are between the individuals and the UK National Crime Agency. And the cases were started due to the fact that they are not able to prove where they are actually getting the money from. So basically, the crime agency thinks that it's laundering money, and that's why it's going to the court, and they are not able to prove that it's not laundering money, and then they are losing their money in the court. And my father had a plan to work with the UK National Crime Agency to transfer at least some part of this capital to the charity fund he registered in order to finance the scholarship for the Azerbaijani students who would like to study abroad. And he announced this on the 27th of June 2023 on Facebook, and also the charity fund was established on the 27th of June. And 3 weeks later, he was detained by the Azerbaijani government. And we believe that this also played a major role in his detainment. I could also talk about his current medical issues, because that's our main concern at the moment. He was not the most healthiest guy going to the prison. He had type 2 diabetes, he had hypertension, he had back pains that occurred while he was starting to live in London. In order to cope with that, the doctor told him to work at least an hour a day. So he would, in the last couple of years, he would work at least 1 or 2 hours a day. However, right now in prison, he cannot work more than 5 minutes a day. This is also one of the points the Azerbaijan government has falsified in their report back to the UN Special Rapporteurs. They have mentioned that he is allowed to go to the garden and walk freely until 6 p.m. And I have asked this from the lawyers, and they said he has never been allowed to go to garden even once. So it's blatant rights by the government of Azerbaijan regarding their own citizens to the organizations like UN or European Court of Human Rights. That is so easy to spot to the lawyer, to the documentation that we have, but the government still does it because I feel like they have come to the point that they just don't care. And another issue is also the fact that right now in prison, he's not getting the medical treatment that he requires. He has very high level of blood sugar, very high level of blood pressure. He is forced to take insulin injections. He did not take any insulin injection before imprisonment. Now he's taking 22 units a day. So his heart rate has gone up to 115, 120 because of the insulin injection in a minute, which is very dangerous. And also we have a European Court of Human Rights decision granted on the Rule 39 interim measurements, which is only granted in the case that where there might be irreparable damage to the person's health. And there's a delusion of the aortic root that's expanding to his heart, which could lead to heart attack. And this is the main reason why he's given Rule 39. He's granted Rule 39. So there's a lot of issues with his health, but the government does not put enough emphasis on it. And on the other hand, they're actually falsifying the numbers that they send to UN Special Rapporteurs, European Court of Human Rights. We have tried to raise this case many times with the Council of Europe, foreign officers that I have met, that my brother or my sister have met, but nothing has happened so far. It does feel like the government is doing this deliberately. And you might ask why they would do such things deliberately. What's their gain? I think their main gain is the fact that the person who is politically active, once they leave the prison, they are not really going to be working on their political career, but rather on their health issues. So they'll be dealing with their health issues for the years to come. And this is why it's crucial for them to basically deteriorate your health conditions so that when they even let you go, you just cannot really deal with other issues other than your health. Because with the case of Rayvan Arif Yunus that we have seen during the NGO crackdown of 2015, Rayvan Arif Yunus told us that they were so badly, like their health was so badly deteriorated that they couldn't get up from the bed. So the government would just bring an ambulance to the prison, take them to the court with the ambulance, and then bring them back with an ambulance. So like in such cases, in any other country, especially a country that has adopted European Human Rights Convention, would probably let you go for a hospitalization or like house arrest. But like in the case of Azerbaijan, you just go to the court session with an ambulance and then come back with an ambulance. And I believe that apart from the fact that they want you to have bad health issues, also they don't care. Because we have seen with the case of Rayvan Arif Yunus that only after the German doctor was brought to examine them, it was revealed that Rayvan Yunus has developed a cancer in prison. And government did not really spend enough attention to, I mean, they probably had the facilities to find this earlier, but they just didn't want to do it. I think it's because they just don't care. And it's something that could put them in a big trouble, because if she dies there, that's a huge issue for the government. A political prisoner dying in prison, even for a government like Azerbaijan, it's a huge issue, but they still don't care. Still don't care enough to actually examine her. And we have the same issue with my family, with my father at the moment.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us this insight. I mean, you touched upon a lot of important points. I think what you said about denying basic medication and his worsening health situation can be described as inhumane and treatment or even as torture. And I think you also mentioned rightly that Azerbaijan is not a country like Iran, China, or now Russia that has, is not part of this human rights institutional framework. But Azerbaijan actually signed the European Convention on Human Rights, and it does say how you're supposed to treat, first of all, people that are in prison, but second of all, that of course you cannot just detain people on false allegations. And this is what we're seeing with your father very clearly. Maybe, I mean, one point that you did touch upon is about how much access does he have to his lawyer? Do they have regular, interaction? Maybe you can say a few words about this. And then second of all, you did mention that the European Court of Human Rights actually took action with this interim measure. And they actually said that the Azerbaijani government needs to give him access to a medical team, and that if his condition is so bad that he needs to go to hospital, they have to allow this. So maybe you can give us a few details on, so far, how has the reaction of the government been? Has anyone had access? And if not, what do you think should happen as a next step? Like, what can institutions like the Council of Europe do to give him the rights he's entitled to? I think let's leave it by this. And also, if there are questions from the audience, don't hesitate. You can write them in the chat or raise your hand. To you, Ibad.
Thank you. With the case of lawyers, he is able to see his lawyers without any interruption. But obviously, they are being watched, they are being listened when they meet. But the issue with the lawyer is the fact that he cannot call his lawyers. He is deprived of the right to call his lawyers. We have appealed for it 3 times, and all 3 times it has been rejected. So he's not able to call his lawyers, which is an issue, because if something important happens, especially regarding his health issues, he might not be able to call his lawyers because of this ban. And he's not the only one, by the way, facing this ban. Also, the other political prisoners are not able to call their lawyers. So this is a scheme or a tactics used by the Azerbaijan government not to let political prisoners call their lawyers. Apart from that, with the decision of the European Court of Human Rights, the court has decided that he needs to get adequate medical treatment and medical examination, and also there must be updates regularly to the court by Azerbaijan government, and if needed, he must be hospitalized. We have seen one communication between the court and the Azerbaijan government. After that, it's on the 6th of November that the Azerbaijan government has provided update. And on the 21st of November, to our lawyer, we have denied this update. We have told the court that we do not accept it. And why do we not accept it? Because Azerbaijan government, as I mentioned, are falsifying the numbers. And how could they do that and get away with it? It's because they are not letting any third-party organization visit my father or anyone in the political in prison these days at all anyway. Like, there's a case of International Committee of Red Cross who has been to prison 4 times and requested to see him and has been rejected all 4 times. And we know that there's a forensic expert from Denmark who has requested to medically examine him, and they were also rejected. We know that there are some embassies that has requested to see him in prison, but they have not gotten any response at all. Azerbaijan government is basically hiding my father and also other political prisoners from the public view. My father right now has his back pains has become so severe that he used walking stick to get up from the bed because he cannot get up himself, and they have actually confiscated his walking stick, and they are doing this because they don't want anyone to see him with walking stick. It's all for the PR. Even the fact that there's nobody literally coming to see them in prison, they are still taking away the walking stick, and he takes at least a minute to get up from the bed these days. So with that being in mind, the fact that no one is able to go to prison, see my father, or see the other political prisoners, Azerbaijan government is just basically falsifying any details about him. They are falsifying his conditions too, that he stays in a prison cell that's sanitized very regularly, which is a lie, because my father has mentioned to the lawyers that he has seen rats, bugs every day. And there's also another case with the Hafiz Babalı, who is the investigative journalist who was invited to the police station a month ago in the case of Abzas Media, and he noticed that the windows are quite unclean. And he asked, when was the last time the windows was cleaned? He said, the police said, I don't know. Then he checked that there was more than 1 million USD contract was signed very recently with the police stations and these cleaning services, that they would come and clean the police stations very regularly. So basically, this is all way to actually, put the money in their pockets. Maybe Azerbaijan government did actually agree with some company to clean up the prisons, as they say in their reports back to UN special rapporteurs, but there's just no cleaning at all. And he's also facing that issue. So basically, they are able to falsify anything about the court, about his condition, about the condition of the cell, and then they can get away with it. And also the witnesses are falsified. They're fake. We know that this guy who was brought from Turkey. He was basically kept in the detention center for more than a week. He was beaten up probably so many times that he agreed to go against my father, despite the fact that he was texting me after my father's imprisonment, that because of my father's idea, the charter fund idea, we should nominate him for a big rewards like Sakharov maybe. That it's a very unique idea. So the guy who was telling me we should do everything to get Dr. Ibadoglu out of prison actually became a witness in his case and started to talk against him. That he met with him in Turkey and told him that he has $40,000 fake money that he would like to save in Azerbaijan. So this is the whole process is actually falsified from beginning to the end. And then you see on the 8th of December, Miss Maria Buric, Secretary General of Council of Europe, come to Azerbaijan and talk about the reforms on the judiciary system. And also Azerbaijan received a medal last year about the reforms on the judiciary system by the Council of Europe. So points like this, they received Crystal Scales of Justice Award by the Council of Europe because their judicial reforms has made their judicial system nearly as good as the European judicial systems. To Azerbaijani person who sees this, it sounds so ridiculous because the whole process of judicial system of the trial system is basically falsified, and the decisions are given by the government officials to the judges before the court session. So everything is pre-designed. So how could someone talk about the judicial reforms when the country is still doing the same things they used to do in the Soviet Union period? I mean, it's now like 30 years ago. It's the same ideology. Like if you look at the political prisoners, we now have 254 political prisoners, actually probably now 256 or 57 because this report came out on the 1st of December. And since 1st of December, they have imprisoned around 3 or 4 new political prisoners. So every week, these numbers are going up. And in last year, September 2022, there was only 99 political prisoners. So the numbers of political prisoners in Azerbaijan within 1 year has more than doubled and reached 254 political prisoners. And with these political prisoners, they mostly use the same allegations. They say they use the allegations of selling and use of drugs, narcotics. Like probably 80% of them is the same allegation, same accusation, use of drugs and narcotics. And it's a very actually interesting story, which is the case of Ilhamis Guriev. He's an ex-police, and he gave an anonymous interview to Abzas Media around 2 months ago. And he talked about anonymously that the government, when they seize these drugs, narcotics, they don't register them. And later on, they use them for the political cases. Like later on, when they detain a political opposition figure, they just put the drugs, narcotics that they seized in another case to their case, and basically detain them under the allegation of use of narcotics. And Ilhamis Guriev gave this interview to Abzas Media, and within the last 1 month, they have detained 4 members of Abzas Media, Uvi Hassani, director, Mehmet Kakarov, director's assistant, Nargis Absalamova, journalist, and Vasi Sevinç Vagif kızı, and she was the editor-in-chief. So, and through one of their computers, they managed to learn the person, like who was the anonymous interviewer. They noticed Ilhamis Guriev, so he knew that this might come. Ilhamis Guriev actually took a drug test, and the result was negative. 2 days later, he was detained, and his accusation is use of drugs and narcotics. So really blatant lies that they use. Even the fact that the guy took a test 2 days ago is not enough because they just don't care. They put these allegations on you, and if you are not that famous, they know that no one is going to mention your case anyway. And at the moment, there's more than 250 political prisoners in Azerbaijan anyway. So the numbers is so big. Like which of the political prisoners are you going to focus at this point? It's just crazy.
Yeah, I think, and you point out rightly that at the moment there seems to be zero attention on the crackdown and political prisoners in Azerbaijan. And you said that the Secretary General recently actually traveled to Azerbaijan. She's the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, so one of the oldest and biggest human rights organizations in Europe. And the same week she travels to Azerbaijan, journalists get arrested. And I mean, it's so obvious that there's a crackdown happening. And we'll in a second also ask you about the general trend in Azerbaijan and the new laws that they passed. But this just shows, on the one hand, the ignorance of these institutions, but also the sheer that they simply don't want to look at what's happening. And I think this is a big danger because in the end, it also encourages the president and the Azerbaijani government to continue because they see that they get away with it. So maybe before, I'll give the floor to Zoe so you can ask some more questions on the general trend.
Yeah, because it's when you're telling these I mean, horrible details of the case of your father, it's of course it's as it is, it's really intense to listen to. But I was wondering if you could maybe connect this also to the general and the broader perspective in Azerbaijan. So where you have restrictions, of course, on freedom of expression and freedom of association, and you have laws that are, for example, restricting how NGOs and activists can assemble and can register, can apply for funds, and in the administrative system, these are cracked down on, and the authorities are, as you're also saying, carrying out these arbitrary arrests and politically motivated persecutions of activists such as your father. So maybe if you could give us some bit of context on these different laws, so the media law and these laws on political prisoners, and you also mentioned these recent arrests, to kind of give a picture of what is the situation in the country, but also has it always been like this? What are the recent changes?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, it has always been like this. Sometimes less, sometimes more. Sometimes few people getting detained. Sometimes, like today, 250 people getting detained. But it has always been like this. It's the Soviet Union ideology still running through the government of Azerbaijan. So that's why whenever someone would get replaced in the government, like a minister, usually people doesn't really get excited about it because the system is the same as the Soviet Union system. It doesn't matter who you bring. It's gonna be the same. It's gonna be the person who's again gonna get bribery. The whole system is built on a bribery anyway. If you go to like hospitals, it's bribery. If police stops you, it's bribery. Like the whole system is built on a bribery, and whole system is built on a nepotism. So it's the Soviet Union system that's still running through the whole country, which is basically poisoning the country's future. And I could start with the NGOs because that's the first one actually. So NGO came to the power in 2014, if I remember correctly, which is known as the NGO crackdown in Azerbaijan, which is something that they tried to do early this year in Georgia, but they failed because people stood their ground and did not accept it, actually. So NGO crackdown was that government has demanded all the NGOs to report to them and also report their articles, publications, and all the fundings that they get to them. So basically, there's nothing about NGO that's left. If you are gonna report everything to the government, then how could it be an NGO? So after this, an NGOs like my father's who rejected this ideology had to go. NGO leaders like my father had to go into exile, and just like my father, he also had to went into an exile in 2015 because there was a case, a persecution case opened against him from 2 to 7 years against those who actually rejected the new NGO reforms. And they frozen my father's bank accounts. This means that basically the NGO ceased to exist, because if you cannot receive any funding, then it doesn't have any point to continue. And then the cases of Vera and Arif Yunus is also NGO cases. So there were many people who were imprisoned because of the NGO crackdown, and it's still the same. So basically right now in Azerbaijan, all the NGOs that are still operating are basically within the frame of Azerbaijan government. So the publications and all the donors are in frame of Azerbaijan government. So there is not really anything independent about NGOs left in the country. And this was the first crackdown we had. And then in 2022, we had the media law, which came into force, which basically says that all the publications through the media so government has the right to basically delete the publications that you have done. So they have the total control over the media, whatever you're going to publish, whatever you're going to put in the internet. So everything has to go to the government. And if they don't like it, they have the right to basically overturn it. They have the right to basically ask you to delete it. And then also your journalist permission to work as a journalist can be overturned by the government. So in 2022, they tied up the media to themselves, and then in 2023, this time they went behind the political parties. They brought this rule of 5,000 political party members in Azerbaijan, so that every political party must have at least 5,000 registered political party members. And you might say that, some parties are able to get that number. What could be an issue with that? The issue is actually the fact that being a member of opposition political party in Azerbaijan is quite dangerous, because we have so many people who have been signed up to my father's political movement, and then later on they had to leave because either they got pressured by their workplace or maybe their family. Because if you actually become a member of a political party, then it might affect your family's job. Like I had so many people who told me that after they shared about my father, their uncle or their father or their parents text them and told them that you should tweet it because it might get me in trouble. So many friends of mine were actually getting pressured by their families or their workplaces if they share anything about, it's not about saying it's only saying freedom to Dr. Ibadoglu. So it doesn't mention anything else. It doesn't mention the government. Only saying freedom to Dr. Ibadoglu. That's even enough to have an issue. So in order to keep you cannot in most of the cases, if you work in these organizations or in government, you cannot be a member of opposition political party. You cannot share about them on Facebook. We have recent cases that people who basically share the post and criticize the head of the police was detained for 30 days. He was detained for 30 days over a Facebook post criticizing the head of the police. So even everything is so tightly regulated, even the media, they are checking it all the time. And with the fact that you cannot become a political party member without getting any pressure, the outside pressure made it so hard that more than 50% of the parties just ceased to exist after the rule came to force, because they know that they couldn't get 5,000 people. And now we have maybe around 15 political parties left. And it's now more clear that the government's decision to have this 5,000 rule was also mostly to close the area. So moving forward, probably they are not going to let any new political party to emerge. So they brought this rule mostly because they wanted to stop it completely for the further emerging of the new political parties through this rule. And even through this rule, there are people who have signed up for this opposition political parties. So in the case of AHCP, which is a populist movement party, if I remember correctly in English, they have 10 members who have signed up to the list has been imprisoned. So they check the list and they might imprison these people like randomly maybe, or maybe they have some patterns, I'm not sure. So every part of political environment is very toxic in Azerbaijan, and they have literally closed up all the options for you to raise your voice. I mean, now we have seen what happened in the journalist cases. In the past 1 month, they have detained around eight journalists, 4 from Abdas Media, and then we have the case of Hafiz Babalı, who is the investigative journalist. He was working on the government corruption, and then there's a case of Temur Karimov. He's from Channel 11. Aziz Oğuzov, who is from Channel 13. And we also have the Arshad Ibrahimov and the other 4 members that I've mentioned from Abdas Media. And this all started because Abdas Media started to investigate government officials' corruption scandals. So, like, you cannot try to go against this government because of them doing this investigative journalism. Now there are like 8 journalists in prison. They are all linked to these cases in one way or another, and they all are now in pre-trial for 4 months, just like my father. By the way, my father was in pre-trial for 4 months, and now they extended for another 3 months. So he's gonna be there until February 2024. And after that, they might see prison time up to 12 years. On what? Because they did investigative journalism on the government corruption. So they have closed all the possible options. And I just want to raise one more issue with action plan for the Azerbaijan for 2022-2025 adopted by the Committee of Ministers in the Council of Europe, because I find it quite interesting and hilarious that all the points that have been mentioned, and we are already in 2024, so most of this period, and the action plan was signed on the 16th of February 2022. So nearly 2 years passed, only 1 year left. And I checked the action plans that have been put on by the Maria Buric, the Secretary General of Council of Europe, and I see none of them has been implemented, or not a thing. In fact, they all have been deteriorated. Like there's an action plan for the youth for democracy, like the letting youth becoming more active in the political environment, which is non-existent. There's a case for the bar association. My sister is actually a human rights lawyer, and she knows very well that bar association is cause for the independent human rights lawyer. Only very tiny part of the opposition political opposition human rights lawyers could get into bar association, and it's only to the pressure by the foreign governments. So, and there's also improving European courts of human rights executions of the case law at the national level, which is not happening. We see that government is falsifying the results to the court. Improving criminal justice system, which is definitely deteriorating because, like as I mentioned, like they are using the narcotics in the political cases, and then in the cases like my father and like the cases of Ulvi Hassani, the director of Abdas Media, they say that they are smuggling money to the country. And again, we're quite interesting that same amount of money, $40,000 in my father's case and 40,000 euro in Ulvi's case. Ensuring fundamental freedoms not happening, capacity building for the mass media not happening, enhancing information security and personal data protection. So they have actually, since imprisonment of my father, they have get into one of our lawyers' Facebook account and published fake news about my father. They have managed to get hold of my uncle's Facebook account and deleted everything. Many times they have tried to get into mine or my brother's or my sister's Facebook accounts or email accounts. So the personal data protection is also not happening. Increasing the independence and effectiveness of the judiciary system, definitely not happening. So many points, and there are other points about like the gender equality, which is not so much political, so I'm not getting into those ones, but like these ones that are pretty much related to political political, political environment in some way, all of them are just deteriorating. And what's the point of having an action plan? Like I'm just thinking out loud that if I work for a company and if I given a task and if I don't do it at all, in fact, if I just mess up everything, there should be some consequences, right? I mean, okay, company and the country is not the same, but at the same time, how come Miss Maria could come to Azerbaijan and she was the one who initiated these action plans and she would not mention any of these issues with the president himself? Like, then what's the point of having action plan? Are we just having it just to have it on the paper? Because it means nothing when you see what's on the action plan and what's actually happening.
No, that's an excellent point, and thank you for giving that context of both the legal, you could say, context of these different laws, the NGO law, where NGOs are basically cannot exist and not have legal personality in a normal way, and the media law, the way that both you personally have experienced, restrictions, and not just restrictions, but deleting information and how it's being broadly used by the government. And this political parties law is also interesting that you mentioned, because of course, if you're repressed by joining an opposition party, how will you ever achieve any members at all? So all these administrative, you could say, rules that have been imposed really show that these are the kinds of things that should not be able to happen in a country that has signed up for the core values of the Council of Europe. So basically the rule of law. And just, citing what we've all signed up for, including Azerbaijan, is Article 3 of the Council of Europe Statute, which is about the rule of law, and that every member state of this institution should accept or must accept the principle of rule of law. So what you really well describe here is that all these examples on your personal level, but also on the broader societal level, are being ignored. And by this action plan in particular, that is very pretty on paper, but not really resonating, and there's not any action being followed up. So maybe on this account and on this background, what has been the reactions and the support within this framework? Because we have all these beautiful papers and beautiful action plans, but what happens out there, and what in your kind of touring activism in different countries, maybe give us a bit of information there, how people receive your message and receive these core and very basic facts that you're putting out there.
Very mixed, I would say. Thank you for the question. Quite mixed, because especially with the current developments around the world, around the Europe, Azerbaijan government does see the opportunity to do their operation and get away with it. Many people that I've talked to have been telling me stuff like, oh, the region has been so complicated that there hasn't been enough time to discuss the situation in Azerbaijan, or like what has Russia done has been so severe that people think, compared to Russia, what Azerbaijan doing is not that much of a big thing. So we should just focus on Russia. Like I was just thinking actually, the other day out loud, just for myself, that with the German Foreign Office, because German Foreign Office, I think they have the same team for the Eastern Europe and the South Caucasian. At least the head of the team is the same. So so much of attention is going to Ukraine and Russia or Belarus, that because the team has to work on the same topics. the same team has to work on both Eastern Europe and the South Caucasus. Eastern Europe is just taking all the points, and then there's no mention of South Caucasus in reality, because like it should be really mentioned what's happening. So in the governmental level, there's not much happening. Like we have seen some actions by the embassies in Azerbaijan, raising the case with the Azerbaijan Foreign Ministry, but Azerbaijan Foreign Ministry has embraced a new tactics, that they are basically delaying the court decision so that they could tell you that without final decision we cannot comment on this. So my father was in pretrial detention for 3 months and 26 days, and then on the 19th of November it should have ended, but on the 16th of November they extended his pretrial detention by another 3 months. And there's a case of Hajiev, who was imprisoned, I believe early 2023, and he's still in pretrial detention. So if you keep continuing and delaying the decision, the court decision, and keep these people in the pretrial detention, then basically you could just say that you could just say everyone that there's no final decision, so it's very early to talk about. We have to wait until the final court decision. So this is a tactic used by the Azerbaijan government these days, with the embassies located in Azerbaijan. But what about Council of Europe? I just seen the draft agenda for the next session of Council of Europe, which is between 22nd January, 26th of January, a winter session. And there was no mention of Azerbaijan. There was no mention of human rights deterioration in Azerbaijan. So basically, obviously it's just draft at the moment, but this is so obvious and still not even put in the draft version. Is just, to me, it could be actually quite criminal against Azerbaijani people who have been oppressed in such a high level, who have been put in prisons, who have been detained just because they exercise their freedom of speech, their basic human rights, which is also what Council of Europe is all about. It's the promotion of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law at its heart. This is what the Council of Europe is all about. This is what was the reason why Council of Europe was founded initially. But then a member of Council of Europe, a member country, has been undermining all these principles, basic principles, to great extent, and then there's no talks about it in the Council of Europe next session. I mean, there was no talk about it on the autumn session, apart from the side event which was organized by the Gerald Knaus, Jeremy Corbyn, and Peter Omstig. So that was the only Azerbaijan case that was brought up in terms of the human rights. So there's no mention of human rights issues in Azerbaijan in the winter session. So when these organizations are not doing what they have to do, when the organizations are basically taking pragmatism over the principles of the organization, then our governments like Azerbaijan would just run them over. They would just imprison everyone, because they see that no one is paying attention. Like UK ambassador to Azerbaijan said he's very sad about the imprisonments. I mean, what does it mean? Like, what does it help actually when you are very sad about imprisonments? It's obvious that being very, very sad is not helping anything. Unless you are not taking any action, it's not helping anything. On the contrary, last week, UK government signed a new commerce deal with Azerbaijan government, and they have increased the volume of transaction between two governments. And also last month, on the 6th of November, there was an e-commerce meeting between Azerbaijan and the UK, and the UK government officials were talking about how safe it is to invest in Azerbaijan to the UK investors. Like when the money, when the economy is over the human rights for the European countries that the so-called defenders of the human rights, like United Kingdom, you just don't know who to expect help from, right? I mean, you seeing all these issues, still signs this contract about the new business deals with Azerbaijan, despite the fact that there's now 254 political prisoners in Azerbaijan, despite the fact that some of these political prisoners were actually work with the UK government. Muhammad Kakarov, who was the assistant of the Abzas Media's director, he had a great idea. He was working on the adaptive fashion for the disabled people, which was also funded partially by the UK government. I mean, Muhammad is in prison now, and UK government worked with him previously. What did they do? Nothing really. I mean, apart from being very sad, nothing. So when the financial interest is over the human rights principles, it's not going to, it's always going to be like this, because the government, like governments like Azerbaijan government, an authoritarian regime, when they see that no one is actually pushing back, when they imprison this many people, they would just continue. I mean, you have to consider that Azerbaijan just won the war and basically liberated all Nagorno-Karabakh. So Aliyev is probably in its peak right now in Azerbaijan in terms of its famous, right? It's like because he's now this war general that was victorious in the war. He still sees the reason. He still sees the need to imprison people, because this is the authoritarian regime's principles. They would never trust human rights, like the freedom of speech. Like he will have presidential election in 2 months on the 7th of February, which I should mention that, because I think most of these political imprisonments also related to that too, because if you detain all the journalists or your opposition or the politicians, then who is gonna talk about the frauds, or who is gonna oppose you in the elections? Nobody. Basically, it's like it's always a quite far example, but like example of, let's say, North Korea, who is actually facing Kim Jong-un? Nobody. Obviously, Azerbaijan is very far from North Korea, but just saying that, when you imprison everyone, there's no one left to face you. So even when he's so popular, he still sees the need to imprison everyone, because this is the mindset of the authoritarian regime. And he can't get away with it, because the foreign governments, foreign organizations who should have not let Azerbaijan do this, because of the principles that they have within the Council of Europe, within the UN, they just be silent about it. They are not taking any concrete steps apart from saying that, oh, we are sorry that this is happening in Azerbaijan. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Ibad, for giving us this overview. And I think the examples you have shown today, first that they got the Rule of Law Award by the Council of Europe, but also that there was this action plan that was signed, and that Buric, the Secretary General, recently went to Azerbaijan and actually praised Aliyev for the good cooperation. All of this shows that by looking away, things are getting worse in Azerbaijan. So the core task of the Council of Europe, which was actually to become a warning mechanism, to be the first institution that can warn countries when something goes wrong, is completely failing. And just as an example, Russia was a member of the Council of Europe, and while it was a member, it has waged 4 wars, first in Chechnya, then in Georgia, in Syria, and in Ukraine. And over 20 years, no real action was taken until there was such a big escalation on the 24th of February 2022, that basically the institution had no other choice but to kick them out. And I think we've seen in the case of Russia how we blatantly fail to see all of the warning mechanisms. I mean, we had Politovskaya, who was shot in 2008. We had Nemtsov. I mean, we had so many examples where the Council of Europe should have reacted much earlier, but it didn't. So I think we should learn from our past mistakes and not let the same thing happen with Azerbaijan, because in the end, when a country becomes aggressive towards the inside, repressing media, repressing civil society, locking up people who have different political views, this can also turn into aggression towards the outside. So I think we shouldn't underestimate the danger we see also for the region, and of course for the 254 political prisoners today, and your father being one of them. So I want to thank you very much for sharing the story, for sharing or giving us insight into the developments in Azerbaijan. And I think it should be an appeal to all of us to raise awareness and also challenge our own countries who are all members of the Council of Europe and who are all sitting in the Committee of Ministers, and to challenge our own governments to do more, to not let countries get away with such blatant human rights violations. So I want to thank you very much for your time and for everyone who was listening today. And if there's any closing sentence or thought you want to say, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Francisca and Zoe, for inviting me. There's just so many to speak, but yeah, obviously, always some could be mentioned. But I just want to say in the end that nothing is one-sided. Like cryptocracy, which is very much now is in the same content with the Azerbaijan government. Cryptocracy cannot happen only with one actor. There must be two actors. So one giving the money and the other one taking the money. So we have seen this with the cryptocracy cases that's happening in the UK, which is again a Council of Europe member, very recently European Union member, and one of the biggest democracies that we call, and also so the fact that the governments are just closing their eyes to this. I mean, this is one of the reasons why carrier diplomacy happened in the first place too, because if you are not reading, if you're playing the game of the autocrats, they will in the end get you to their own game. And we see that with the Orban in European Union these days. This is just how they play with Putin for a long time. I mean, because Europe did play his game, like he managed to drag you into this situation that we now have in Europe. So unless a concrete action is taken, this will be a vicious circle that's going to happen again and again and again. Carrier diplomacy was not a one-off thing. I'm sure Azerbaijan would still do that again, given the chance and given the fact that they did not get really any punishment for it in the Council of Europe. So if you read this, if you play with the autocrats, they will take over at some point, and we should not let that happen. We should always try to stop them in the first instance that we have, but unfortunately we are not learning from that. Hopefully maybe for the future.
No, I fully agree. And maybe on this note, last week, the Serbian president actually openly, publicly said that Aliyev is his great example of this great democrat, he said. And because he waited 27 years for the right geopolitical moment to take over Nagorno-Karabakh. And we know that, if the Serbian president says this, he's referring to Kosovo, to take back land that he considers his own. So we're already seeing how the way we react to Azerbaijan is inspiring other autocrats to also, act in the same way. So it should be a warning to all of us that, we have to react now before it's even too late. Yeah, well, I thank you very much, Ibad, for your time. This event was recorded, so we will also publish it on our website, the European Debate Initiative, and continue the advocacy and make sure that in January at the PACE session in the Council of Europe, yeah, we actually talk about human rights violations happening in Azerbaijan today. Thanks a lot, and all the best to you and your family as well.
Thank you.
I think Lydia, yeah, she has raised her hand, but I don't know.
I mean, I could take a question if you feel like we
Yeah,
can finish it.
of course, if there are questions, feel free to take the floor.
Yeah, we just asked the question in the chat now and just got an answer. So yeah.
It was a very short answer, but I could tell you this: it's really tough to estimate these days, forecast what's gonna happen, because they keep imprisoning people. So despite all the backlash, I mean, we have had a lot of backlash from the embassies. I mean, not to the government level, but especially to the organizations where like Publish What You Pay, or like the journalists have been talking about it for a long time. So that, but we don't know, you know, with the autocrats, you never know what they are doing and why they are doing. Like again, like he was victorious in the war, but he still see the need to imprison people before the election. So we hope maybe after the election, once he would become president for the next 7 years until 2031. He would pardon people, because it's such a long time. I mean, but we are not sure if he would do that. So we're still fighting for his advocacy. We see, I guess, with elections will play a huge role, I would say.
Thank you for answering that question.
If there are any more questions, feel free to. Okay, otherwise we'll close the session. Thanks again, Ibad, and we'll be in touch. And good luck also to your father.
Thank you, Francesca. Thank you, Zoe.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Ciao. Ciao.
Bye.